Undercover boss orders lunch at his own diner, freezes when waitress complains about pay cuts. The rusty bell above Corbin's family diner chimed with a tired wheeze as Miles Corbin pushed through the glass door he had once polished with his own hands. 23 years had passed since he first hung that bell, salvaged from his grandfather's old country store. Now, dressed in a worn flannel shirt and scuffed work boots, with 3 days of stubble shadowing his jaw, he looked nothing like the man whose framed photograph still hung behind the cash register, younger, cleaner, prouder. Miles had spent the last 5 years building his restaurant empire across 3 states, trusting Trevor Walsh, his former assistant manager, to keep the flagship location running like clockwork. The numbers looked good on paper. Profits were steady, customer complaints minimal according to corporate reports. But numbers could lie, and Miles had learned that lesson the hard way when his ex-wife cleaned out their joint accounts while he was busy expanding the business. The phone call that brought him here came from his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who had been eating at Corbin's every Tuesday for 15 years. Her voice trembled with disappointment as she described rude service, cold food, and a feeling that something just isn't right anymore. When Miles checked online reviews that night, his stomach dropped. Hidden beneath the obviously fake 5-star reviews were dozens of genuine complaints stretching back 18 months. The old staff was like family. These new kids don't care. Food took 45 minutes and was still cold. Server was on her phone the whole time. This place used to be special. Now it's just another greasy spoon with attitude. Each review felt like a knife twist. This diner wasn't just a business, it was his father's dream, carried forward after a heart attack claimed him at 52. Miles had sworn on his father's grave that Corbin's would always be a place where hard work was rewarded and every customer felt like family. The interior hit him like a slap. The warm burgundy walls had been painted sterile white. The family photos and local high school sports trophies that once lined the shelves were gone, replaced by generic motivational posters about team spirit and customer satisfaction. Even the classic rock that used to play softly in the background had been replaced by aggressive pop music that made conversation difficult. Miles slid into a corner booth, the same one where he used to do homework, while his father worked the dinner rush. The red vinyl was cracked and poorly patched with duct tape. He pulled out a worn paperback novel, his cover story, and waited. A young man with bleached hair and multiple ear piercings approached the table, moving with the casual arrogance of someone who knew he couldn't be fired. His name tag read Brad, in cheerful letters that didn't match his bored expression. "Yeah, what do you want?" Brad asked, not bothering to make eye contact as he pulled out his phone to check a text message. Miles bit back his first instinct to correct the kid's attitude. "I'll have the Tuesday special and a coffee black." "We don't do the Tuesday special anymore. Too complicated." Brad's thumb moved across his phone screen. "You want a burger or what?" The Tuesday special, meatloaf with mashed potatoes and green beans, had been Miles's father's signature dish. He'd made it every Tuesday for 20 years, and Miles had continued the tradition. Hearing it dismissed as too complicated felt like watching someone tear down a family monument. "Then I'll take the meatloaf," Miles said carefully. "Dude, I just told you we don't do that anymore. Are you even listening?" Brad's voice carried across the dining room, causing several customers to look up from their meals. Before Miles could respond, a woman in her 40s hurried over from behind the counter. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and despite the exhaustion in her brown eyes, she offered Miles a genuine smile that reminded him of the old Corbins. "I'm so sorry about that," she said, shooting Brad a warning look. "I'm Rosa, and I'll take care of you. We actually do still have meatloaf. It's not on the printed menu, but I can ask the kitchen to make it special for you." Brad rolled his eyes dramatically. "Whatever, Rosa. You always make everything complicated." He wandered away without another word, leaving Rosa to shake her head in frustration. "I apologize for Brad," Rosa said quietly, pulling out her order pad. "He's still learning customer service. The meatloaf comes with mashed potatoes and green beans, just like it always has. And the coffee's fresh. I made it myself 20 minutes ago." Miles studied Rosa's face, noting the practiced way she smoothed over the awkward situation. This was someone who cared about the job, who understood that a restaurant's reputation lived and died on moments like these. She reminded him of Elena, his first waitress, who had worked here for 12 years before retiring to Florida. "That sounds perfect," Miles said. "And thank you for taking care of me." Rosa's smile became more genuine. "That's what we're here for. Well, some of us anyway." She glanced toward Brad, who was now leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone while 2 tables waited for service. As Rosa walked away, Miles opened his book but kept his eyes and ears alert. The diner's rhythm felt wrong, like a song played in the wrong key. Experienced staff moved quickly and efficiently while newer employees wandered aimlessly. Customers waited too long for simple requests. The easy camaraderie he remembered between staff and regulars had been replaced by polite distance. Mrs. Patterson had been right. Something wasn't just wrong, something had been deliberately broken. And Miles intended to find out exactly what had happened to his father's legacy while he was busy chasing bigger dreams. The meatloaf, when it arrived, tasted exactly like his father's recipe. Rosa had remembered everything, down to the dash of Worcestershire sauce in the gravy. But the dining room around him felt like a stranger wearing his family's face. Miles took another bite and settled in for what he suspected would be a very long investigation. Miles returned the next day at lunch rush, choosing a different booth with a clear view of the kitchen pass. He ordered coffee and a slice of apple pie, watching the controlled chaos that should have been the diner's heartbeat. What he saw made his chest tighten with anger. Rosa moved like a dancer navigating a minefield, carrying 3 plates in one arm while balancing a coffee pot in the other. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she served table after table, her professional smile never wavering despite the obvious strain. Meanwhile, Brad lounged at the register, chatting with a blonde girl who couldn't have been older than 19. "Tiffany, babe, you don't need to stress about table 6, Brad said, loud enough for half the diner to hear. "They're just old people. They don't tip anyway." Tiffany giggled, twirling a strand of hair around her finger. "You're so bad, Brad. But Trevor said I only have to work the easy tables until I get used to things." Miles's hand clenched around his coffee mug. Trevor. His trusted general manager was handpicking which tables the new staff served, while veterans like Rosa handled the difficult customers and heavy workload. The favoritism was as obvious as a neon sign. A middle-aged man in a construction vest waved his hand impatiently from a corner booth. "Excuse me. I've been waiting 20 minutes for my check." Rosa looked up from the milkshake she was making, panic flickering across her face. She had 4 other tables waiting for food, 2 more needed their orders taken, and now this. Miles watched her shoulders sag for just a moment before she straightened up. "I'll be right there, sir," she called out, setting down the milkshake and hurrying over with her order pad to calculate the bill by hand. The construction worker's voice rose. "This is ridiculous. What kind of place keeps one person running around while those 2 stand there doing nothing?" He pointed directly at Brad and Tiffany, who were now looking at something on Brad's phone, completely oblivious to the chaos around them. Several other customers turned to stare, and Miles could see the familiar flush of embarrassment creeping up Rosa's neck. "I'm so sorry for the wait," Rosa said, her voice steady despite the obvious stress. "Your lunch is on the house today." "I don't want it on the house, I want decent service," the man snapped, though he was already pulling out his wallet. "I've been coming here for 10 years, and it's never been this bad." As Rosa processed the payment, Miles noticed something that made his blood run cold. She was shaking, not from fear, but from exhaustion and frustration that had nowhere to go. This was a woman who cared deeply about her job, who was watching the place she loved fall apart, while she ran herself ragged trying to hold it together. After the construction worker left, Rosa slumped against the counter for just a moment. That's when Miles overheard the conversation that would haunt him for days. "Girl, you look like you're about to collapse," said Carmen, an older woman who worked the afternoon shift. She was counting out her tips from the morning, her own face showing signs of strain. Rosa glanced around nervously, then leaned closer to Carmen. I don't know how much longer I can do this. They cut my hours again last week, down to 25 from 35. I'm working twice as hard for less money, and watching Brad's little girlfriend get trained on the easy stuff while I handle every problem customer. It's not right, Rosa. You've been here 8 years. You know this place better than anyone except maybe Jerry in the kitchen. Carmen's voice dropped to a whisper. I heard Trevor telling the district manager that the old staff costs too much. Says we're set in our ways and need to be refreshed with younger energy. Miles felt the pie turn to ash in his mouth. Trevor wasn't just playing favorites. He was systematically pushing out experienced employees who knew what Corbin's used to stand for. The budget cuts were a lie, a convenient excuse to replace loyal workers with cheap labor that happened to be connected to management. You know what really gets me? Rosa continued, her voice cracking slightly. Yesterday I trained Tiffany on the computer system. Took me 2 hours because she kept stopping to text. Today she gets the prime dinner shift, while I'm stuck with the breakfast crowd and the difficult afternoon customers. And when Mrs. Henderson complained about her attitude, Trevor just shrugged and said she's learning. Carmen shook her head bitterly. Learning what? How to be rude to customers who've been coming here longer than she's been alive. I've got 30 years of restaurant experience, and I'm getting lectured by a kid who doesn't know the difference between medium rare and well done. The conversation was interrupted by the crash of breaking dishes from the kitchen. Both women immediately snapped back into work mode, their personal grievances pushed aside by professional instinct. But Miles had heard enough. He sat in that booth for another hour, watching the hierarchy play out like a twisted social experiment. Brad and Tiffany handled the young customers, the easy orders, the tables that tipped well. Rosa and Carmen got the complainers, the rush orders, the customers who needed special attention. When a large party of college students came in, Brad immediately claimed them, joking and flirting while Rosa struggled to manage a table of elderly customers who needed help reading the menu. The breaking point came when a customer spilled coffee on Tiffany's shoes. Instead of handling it professionally, she huffed loudly and stomped away, leaving Rosa to clean up the mess while juggling 2 other tables. Miles watched Rosa get down on her hands and knees to wipe up the coffee, her face red with embarrassment, while Tiffany complained loudly to Brad about gross customers and ruined shoes. That's when Miles saw something that made everything click into place. Trevor Walsh emerged from the back office, surveying his domain like a king reviewing his subjects. He was heavier than Miles remembered, his hair thinner, but his eyes held the same calculating coldness that had made Miles uncomfortable during their final meeting 5 years ago. Trevor walked directly to Brad and Tiffany, completely ignoring Rosa scrubbing the floor. He chatted with them quietly, laughing at something Brad said, even patting the kid on the shoulder like a proud father. Then his gaze swept across the dining room and landed on Rosa, still on her knees cleaning. The look on Trevor's face wasn't supervisory concern, it was satisfaction. He was enjoying watching a dedicated employee struggle. This wasn't incompetent management or accidental favoritism. This was deliberate, systematic destruction of everything Miles had built. Miles left a generous tip under his coffee cup and walked out, his mind already forming a plan. Rosa deserved better than this. They all did. And Trevor Walsh was about to learn that some legacies couldn't be bought, sold, or destroyed by petty tyrants with fake smiles and hollow hearts. Over the next 3 days, Miles became a ghost haunting his own restaurant. He arrived at different times: early morning, late afternoon, dinner rush, each visit revealing new layers of corruption that made his stomach churn. The pattern became sickeningly clear. Trevor had created a 2-tier system where loyalty meant nothing and connections meant everything. Thursday morning at 6 a.m., Miles watched through the window as Rosa unlocked the front door, 30 minutes before opening time. She moved efficiently through the dining room, wiping down tables, refilling condiment bottles, and checking that everything was perfect for the breakfast crowd. By the time Brad sauntered in at 6:45, 15 minutes late, Rosa had already completed half the opening duties. "Morning, sunshine," Brad called out mockingly as he clocked in without washing his hands. "Working hard or hardly working?" Rosa didn't respond, focused on filling the coffee machines. Miles noted the tension in her shoulders, the way she deliberately avoided eye contact. This wasn't just workplace friction, this was someone being systematically worn down by daily humiliation. When the first customers arrived, the hierarchy became even more obvious. An elderly couple asked Brad for the senior discount menu, and he responded with exaggerated sighs and eye rolls. "I guess I can find one somewhere," he muttered, making them feel like they were asking for a personal favor. Meanwhile, Rosa handled a table of construction workers with easy professionalism, remembering their usual orders and having their coffee ready before they sat down. The breaking point came when a customer complained that his eggs were cold. Instead of apologizing and fixing the problem, Brad shrugged and said, "Kitchen's been slow all morning. Not my fault." Rosa immediately intervened, apologizing sincerely and rushing to get fresh eggs from the kitchen, but the damage was done. Miles watched the customer shake his head in disgust and leave without paying for his untouched breakfast. Friday evening brought a revelation that made Miles's hands clench into fists. He sat nursing a cup of coffee as the dinner shift began, watching a young man he didn't recognize swagger through the dining room like he owned the place. The kid couldn't have been older than 20, with perfectly styled hair and designer clothes that cost more than most servers made in a week. "Uncle Trevor!" the young man called out as Trevor emerged from the office. "Thanks for hooking me up with the prime shift. This is going to be so much easier than my last job." Uncle Trevor. Miles felt his world tilt sideways as the pieces fell into place. This wasn't just nepotism, it was a family takeover. Trevor was systematically replacing experienced employees with relatives and friends, using Miles's own restaurant as his personal employment agency. "No problem, Kyle," Trevor said, patting his nephew on the back. "Rosa will show you the ropes tonight. She knows all the tricks." Miles watched Rosa's face fall as she realized she was being asked to train her own replacement. Kyle looked her up and down dismissively, clearly unimpressed with his trainer. "Yeah, whatever. How hard can it be, right?" The answer came quickly. Within an hour, Kyle had mixed up 3 orders, spilled wine on a customer's jacket, and argued with the table about the price of dessert. Each mistake fell on Rosa's shoulders as Trevor made it clear she was responsible for Kyle's learning process. "Rosa, table 12 is still waiting for their appetizers," Trevor announced loudly, ensuring the entire dining room could hear. "I thought you were training Kyle properly." "I am, sir," Rosa replied quietly. "Kyle took that order, but there was a mix-up with—" "No excuses," Trevor cut her off. "If Kyle makes a mistake, it's because you didn't teach him correctly. Maybe you're not management material after all." Miles watched Rosa's face crumble for just a moment before she composed herself. Management material? She had been managing this place better than Trevor for months, covering for his failures and protecting the restaurant's reputation, while he systematically destroyed it from within. The final straw came near closing time. Miles was pretending to read his book when he overheard Kyle bragging to Tiffany about his special treatment. "The best part is, Uncle Trevor already told me I'll be assistant manager within 6 months," Kyle said, laughing as he scrolled through his phone instead of cleaning his assigned tables. "These old-timers think they're so important, but they're just dead weight. Trevor's going to clean house and put people like us in charge." "What about Rosa?" Tiffany asked. "She seems to know everything," Kyle snorted. "She's on her way out. Trevor's already got her replacement lined up, my girlfriend from community college. Rosa just doesn't know it yet. Uncle Trevor likes to let them think they have a chance before he pulls the rug out." Miles felt something cold and murderous settle in his chest. This wasn't just workplace drama or even garden variety favoritism. This was calculated cruelty, a deliberate campaign to destroy good people for the crime of caring about their jobs. Trevor wasn't just failing as a manager, he was actively poisoning the culture Miles had spent decades building. As Kyle and Tiffany laughed about Rosa's impending termination, Miles made a decision that would change everything. He pulled out his phone and began making calls to people who still owed him favors: reporters, business contacts, and most importantly, his lawyer. Trevor wanted to play games with people's livelihoods? Miles was about to show him what real power looked like. But first, he needed evidence. Hard proof that would expose not just the favoritism, but the systematic destruction of everything Corbin's family diner had once represented. Miles smiled grimly as he planned his next move. Trevor thought he was untouchable, protected by distance and false reports. He was about to learn how wrong he could be. Miles spent Saturday morning in his hotel room, pacing like a caged animal while making strategic phone calls. By noon, he had a plan that would require patience, precision, and a little help from someone still inside the diner. He needed documentary evidence, schedules, payroll records, anything that would prove Trevor's systematic favoritism in black and white. The answer came from an unexpected source. Jerry Matsumoto had worked the kitchen for 6 years, ever since dropping out of culinary school to help support his sick mother. Miles remembered hiring him, a quiet, hard-working kid who could prep vegetables faster than anyone and never complained about the heat or long hours. Now, watching Jerry through the kitchen window during the Saturday dinner rush, Miles saw someone who had learned to make himself invisible. After the crowd thinned out, Miles approached the back entrance where Jerry was taking his smoke break. The young man looked up nervously, clearly not used to customers wandering into the alley. "Sorry, sir, this area is for employees only," Jerry said politely, dropping his cigarette and stepping on it. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Miles said carefully. "I'm actually wondering if you might be able to help me with something. I've been eating here all week, and I can't help but notice some things don't seem quite right." Jerry's eyes darted toward the back door, then back to Miles. There was something in his expression, relief, maybe, that someone else had noticed what he'd been living with every day. "I don't know what you mean, sir," Jerry said, but his voice lacked conviction. Miles took a gamble. "I saw how hard Rosa works compared to some of the newer staff. I saw how that kid Kyle treats customers. And I'm guessing you've seen a lot more from back in that kitchen." Jerry was quiet for a long moment, studying Miles's face. Finally, he sighed deeply. "You're not a health inspector or anything, are you? Just a customer who cares about good restaurants," Miles replied honestly. "And this place used to be something special." "Yeah, it was." Jerry's voice carried a weight of sadness that made Miles's chest tighten. "My first year here, it felt like working for family. Mr. Corbin, the real owner, he used to come by every month, knew everyone's name, asked about our families. Now what?" Jerry glanced around again, then made a decision that would change everything. "Can you meet me tomorrow morning? Early before my shift? There's some stuff you should see." Sunday at 5:30 a.m., Miles sat in his rental car outside Jerry's apartment building, watching the young man emerge with a worn laptop bag and a look of nervous determination. Jerry climbed into the passenger seat and immediately pulled out his phone. "I've been documenting this stuff for months," Jerry said, his fingers flying across the screen. "At first it was just because I thought someone should keep track, you know? But then it got so bad I started thinking maybe I'd need proof someday." What Jerry showed Miles made his blood run cold. Screenshots of the staff group chat revealed Trevor's nephews and friends openly mocking longtime employees. Text messages discussed getting rid of the old guard and making room for fresh blood. Most damning of all were photos Jerry had taken of the scheduling board, showing the systematic reduction of hours for experienced staff while newcomers got prime shifts. "Look at this," Jerry said, scrolling to a particularly ugly exchange. "This is from last month, right after Carmen asked for time off to take her daughter to a doctor's appointment." The messages were brutal. Trevor had written, "These old workers think they can make demands. Time to show them who's really in charge." Kyle had responded with laughing emojis and a comment about dead weight finally sinking. But the most shocking revelation came when Jerry opened a folder on his laptop labeled payroll discrepancies. "I help with inventory, so I see the budget reports," Jerry explained quietly. "Trevor's been lying about the money. Look at this. He told everyone we needed to cut hours because labor costs were too high. But here's the real budget. We're actually under on labor costs for the year." Miles stared at the spreadsheet, his hands shaking with rage. The numbers told a clear story. Trevor had manufactured a budget crisis to justify demoting experienced employees, then used the savings to hire his friends and family at inflated wages. Kyle was making more per hour than Rosa, despite having zero experience and terrible performance. "There's more," Jerry said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I overheard Trevor talking to his wife on the phone last week. He's planning to fire Rosa next Friday, right before the busy weekend. Says he wants to send a message to the other old-timers that nobody's safe." Miles felt the final piece click into place. This wasn't just nepotism or even calculated cruelty, it was theft. Trevor was stealing from the business, manipulating budgets, and destroying lives to cover his tracks. He turned Miles's father's dream into his personal piggy bank and employment agency. "Jerry," Miles said carefully, "would you be willing to testify about what you've seen? To tell the real owner what's been happening here?" Jerry looked surprised. "You know Mr. Corbin? You could say that." Miles pulled out his business card, watching Jerry's eyes widen as he read the name. "I'm going to need copies of everything you just showed me. And I'm going to need you to trust me for just a few more days." Jerry stared at the card, then back at Miles's face, recognition dawning slowly. "Oh my God! You're him. You're actually him. I am. And Trevor Walsh has no idea what's about to hit him." As they sat in that parking lot, sharing coffee from a gas station and planning the downfall of a tyrant, Miles felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The fierce protective love for his people that had once made Corbin's family diner truly special. Rosa, Carmen, Jerry, and all the others who'd kept his father's values alive while he was gone, they deserved justice. And they were about to get it. Wednesday morning, Miles stood in the parking lot of Corbin's family diner, watching delivery trucks arrive with tables, chairs, and a small stage. The sign in the window announced, "Customer Appreciation Lunch Friday 12 p.m. free food and prizes." Trevor had been suspicious when Miles's event planning company called to arrange the celebration, but the promise of positive publicity and corporate approval had won him over. What Trevor didn't know was that 3 local news stations, the food critic from the city paper, and 25 longtime customers had received personal invitations. Jerry had quietly reached out to former employees, and even Mrs. Patterson was coming, curious to see if her beloved diner could be saved. Miles arrived Friday morning at 11 a.m., dressed in a server's uniform borrowed from his other restaurants. A fake mustache and different hairstyle completed his disguise. Trevor walked right past him twice without recognition, too busy preening for the cameras that were beginning to arrive. "Rosa, make sure all the special appetizers get to the VIP tables," Trevor barked, straightening his tie for the 5th time. "And tell that Jerry kid to stop looking so nervous. This is supposed to be a celebration." Rosa nodded wearily, her usual professionalism intact despite the dark circles under her eyes. Miles had heard through Jerry that she'd been working extra shifts to make up for her reduced hours, trying to save money before the axe fell. The injustice of it made his jaw clench. At exactly noon, Trevor stepped up to the microphone with the confidence of a man who thought he owned the world. "Welcome, everyone, to Corbin's Family Diner. I'm Trevor Walsh, General Manager, and I'm proud to celebrate another successful year of—" "Excuse me," Miles interrupted, stepping forward and removing his mustache with a theatrical flourish. "I think there's been a mistake." The room went silent. Trevor's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and pure terror in the span of 3 seconds. Several customers gasped as they recognized the man from the old photographs, and Jerry dropped a tray of glasses in the kitchen, the crash echoing through the stunned silence. "Miles?" Trevor's voice cracked like a teenager's. "What are you doing here? I thought you were in California expanding the—" "I was," Miles said, taking the microphone from Trevor's nerveless fingers. "Until I got some very interesting phone calls about what was happening to my father's restaurant. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Miles Corbin, the actual owner of this establishment, and I have some things to share with you today." Miles pulled out a tablet loaded with Jerry's evidence. The overhead projector, hastily installed for this celebration, displayed the first screenshot, Trevor's group chat messages about getting rid of the old guard. "This is what my general manager really thinks of the people who built this place," Miles announced, his voice carrying clearly through the dining room. "Jerry, would you please read the message dated March 15th? Jerry stepped forward, his hands shaking but his voice strong. Trevor Walsh wrote, "These old workers think they can make demands. Time to show them who's really in charge." And then Kyle Walsh, that's his nephew, replied with laughing emojis and called the longtime staff dead weight. The crowd's murmur turned angry. Mrs. Patterson stood up, her face flushed with indignation. "Rosa Martinez has been serving my family for 8 years. She remembers my grandson's favorite pancakes and asks about my arthritis. How dare you call her dead weight?" Miles clicked to the next slide, the payroll discrepancies. "Trevor told everyone we needed to cut hours because of budget problems. The truth is, we're actually under budget for labor costs. He manufactured a crisis to justify demoting experienced employees while hiring his relatives at inflated wages. That's not..." Trevor tried to interrupt, but Miles held up a hand. "His nephew Kyle, with 0 restaurant experience, makes more per hour than Rosa Martinez, who has 8 years of experience and consistently excellent customer reviews. Would anyone like to guess why?" The room erupted in angry voices. Customers who had watched Rosa struggle while Kyle slacked off began sharing their own stories. The food critic was taking furious notes, and the news cameras captured every word. Miles clicked to the final, most damning piece of evidence, a recording Jerry had made of Trevor bragging to his wife about his cleaning house strategy. Trevor's voice filled the room through the speakers. "These people think loyalty means something. I'm going to fire Rosa next week, right before the weekend rush. That'll teach the others not to question my decisions. By Christmas, this place will be run entirely by people who understand who's really in charge." The silence that followed was deafening. Rosa stood frozen by the coffee station, tears streaming down her face, not from sadness, but from the relief of finally being vindicated. Carmen reached over and squeezed her hand, both women standing taller than they had in months. Miles looked directly into the news cameras. "This isn't just about one bad manager. This is about what happens when we let bullies destroy the things we love. Corbin's family diner was built on the idea that hard work, loyalty, and treating people with dignity would create something special. Trevor Walsh nearly destroyed that in 2 years." He turned to Trevor, who had gone pale and was backing toward the exit. "You're fired. Security will escort you out. Your nephew and his friends can collect their final paychecks tomorrow." The crowd burst into applause as Trevor stumbled toward the door, his empire of nepotism crumbling around him. But Miles wasn't finished. The real work was just beginning. 3 months later, Miles stood in the same corner booth where his investigation had begun, watching the morning rush with a satisfaction deeper than any profit margin could provide. The warm burgundy walls had been restored, family photos and local memorabilia once again lined the shelves, and the gentle classic rock created the perfect backdrop for conversation and laughter. But the real changes went far beyond paint and decorations. Rosa approached his table with the confident smile of someone who knew her worth was recognized. The exhaustion that had marked her face for years had been replaced by genuine enthusiasm, and the manager's badge on her uniform caught the morning light. "The usual Mr. Corbin?" she asked, though they both knew she was really asking if he wanted his father's meatloaf recipe, now permanently restored to the Tuesday special menu. "Actually, I think I'll try something new today," Miles said with a grin. "What does our new floor supervisor recommend?" Rosa's smile widened. The promotion had come with a significant raise and the authority to hire, train, and schedule staff based on merit rather than connections. She'd used that power wisely, bringing back 3 former employees and establishing training standards that emphasized both skill and character. "Jerry's been working on a new breakfast special," she said proudly. "Corbin's Country Benedict, house-made biscuits with local sausage and farm eggs. He's turning into quite the chef." Miles nodded approvingly. Jerry's promotion to assistant kitchen manager had been one of his first decisions, recognizing not just his culinary skills but his integrity during the darkest period. The quiet young man who had risked everything to document Trevor's corruption now led a kitchen team that took pride in every plate. As Rosa walked away to place his order, Miles reflected on the changes that had transformed more than just the diner. The story had made national news, becoming a case study in workplace toxicity and the importance of company culture. 3 other restaurants in the chain had conducted internal audits, discovering and correcting similar problems before they festered. The legal consequences for Trevor had been swift and severe. Employment law violations, wage theft, and breach of fiduciary duty had resulted in criminal charges and a civil lawsuit that would follow him for years. His nephew Kyle had struggled to find work after video of his arrogant behavior went viral, a harsh lesson in the real-world consequences of treating people poorly. But revenge, Miles had learned, was far less satisfying than restoration. Carmen bustled past carrying a tray of steaming coffee cups, her movements confident and unhurried. The veteran server had been promoted to training coordinator, responsible for ensuring that new hires understood both the technical aspects of restaurant service and the deeper values that made Corbin's special. Her first batch of trainees, carefully screened for character as well as competence, had just completed their certification. "Table 6 needs more coffee," called out Marcus, one of the new servers, demonstrating the kind of proactive communication that had been missing during Trevor's reign. Marcus was a single father working his way through nursing school, exactly the kind of person Miles's father would have wanted to support. The breakfast rush proceeded with the smooth efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Orders were taken promptly, food arrived hot, and customers left with smiles and promises to return. The online reviews had transformed from bitter complaints to glowing testimonials about getting the old Corbins back and staff who actually care. Miles's phone buzzed with a text from his district manager. "Flagship location up 23% in customer satisfaction, 18% in revenue. Whatever you did, the other locations want to know about it." What he had done was simple in concept but revolutionary in execution. He had treated his employees like human beings whose dignity and livelihood mattered. Fair schedules, competitive wages, clear advancement paths, and a zero-tolerance policy for favoritism had created an environment where good people could thrive. Jerry emerged from the kitchen carrying Miles's breakfast, his chef's coat pristine and his confidence evident. "Country Benedict as requested," he said, setting down a plate that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Rosa suggested adding the chive garnish. "It looks incredible," Miles said honestly. "Jerry, I've been meaning to ask, are you still interested in finishing culinary school?" Jerry's eyes lit up. "Yes, sir, but I can't afford to take time off work right now. What if I told you the company has a new education assistance program? Full tuition, flexible scheduling, with the guarantee of a head chef position when you graduate?" Jerry's smile could have powered the entire diner. "Sir, that would change everything." Miles took a bite of the perfectly crafted Benedict, savoring both the flavors and the moment. This was what his father had envisioned, a place where good food brought people together, where honest work was rewarded, and where everyone who walked through the door felt like family. Outside, Mrs. Patterson was arriving for her Tuesday meatloaf, just as she had for 15 years. But now she would be greeted by Rose's genuine smile, served by people who took pride in their work, and surrounded by the warmth and dignity that had always been the true recipe for success at Corbin's family diner. The reckoning was complete. The restoration had only just begun.